We are in Proverbs chapter 4. And we finally come to the last two verses. We have been in this passage from verses 20 through 27 now for several weeks. And we are coming to our final test in our spiritual wellness exam. And it has to do with our feet, with our walking. Verses 26 and 27. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or to the left. Keep your foot from evil. Now, it's important for us to understand that when the Bible talks about our walk, he's talking about our life. When the Bible talks about your walk or your feet, he's talking about how you live your life day by day. So we could really say, give careful thoughts to how you live your life. It's the old song. What you are speaks so loud that the world can't hear what you say. They're looking at your walk, not listening to your talk. They're judging by your actions every day. More recently, I heard a song on the radio a while back that the chorus said, your talk talks and your walk talks, but your walk talks louder than your talk talks. Say that 3 times real fast, right? But that's right. Your walk talks and your talk talks, but your walk talks louder than your talk talks. What you are speaks so loud they can't hear what you're saying. Now, in this 2-verse passage, there are 4 things that Solomon says. He says to mentally weigh out the path that you're walking, be established in all your ways, turn away from everything that would be a hindrance, and stay away from evil. And we're going to look at those 4 guidelines on how to live our lives. The King James says, ponder the paths of your feet. The NIV says, give careful thought. The idea is not just think about what you're doing, it's be thoughtful. And it's the idea of being considerate, of weighing the options, of paying attention, of being thoughtful in the decisions that you make. In Proverbs chapter 5, verse 21, he says, your ways are in full view of the Lord, and he examines all your paths. So, make sure that you're making the right decision because the Lord is watching what you're doing. We know that every moment we are choosing the path for our feet. Every decision we make has an impact on our lives. So Solomon says, consider it. Think about it. And the best time to think about it is at the beginning, right? Not the middle, not the end. I remember sometimes, back before GPS and all that, where we'd be out someplace we'd never been, and we said, well, we think we're supposed to turn here, and you turn there, and you go for miles and miles and miles and miles, and then it ends up just being a dead end. And you thought, well, I wish I'd have known that at the beginning of this. I wouldn't have taken this road. But sometimes we do that in our lives. And we say, well, I wish I really wouldn't have made that decision when I made it. So the best time to ponder the path of your feet, the best time to carefully weigh the path you're walking is before you start down that path. You've all heard the saying that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with 1 step. That's typically used to motivate us to get started. But I want to use it this morning as a warning to be careful of that first step. Because you never know where that first step is going to lead you. How many times have you heard somebody say, if I'd have thought this through, I wouldn't have done it. Or if I had thought more carefully about where this was going to end up, I wouldn't have started down this path. Think it through. Proverbs 14:12 says, there is a way that seems right to a person, but it ends in the ways of death. So before you take the first step, be thoughtful. Mentally weigh, ponder, consider the path that you're taking. Now, I know you all are aware of how profound I am and how humble I am in my profundity. But it has not just been in recent years that I have been profound. I have been profound ever since Don has known me. Early in our dating, I don't remember how the conversation came around to it, but it was kind of like, where do you think this is going to end up? And me, in my profound wisdom, even at a young age, said, well, one of two things. We're either going to break up or we're going to get married. That's wise, isn't it? But it's true, isn't it? Tell your young man, be careful who you start dating, because you're either going to break up and hurt somebody or you're going to end up getting married. Think about it. You should have thought about it. Think about it before you start. Ahead of time. God, where is this road going to lead? And the best time to do that is before you even start down the road. I continue to be amazed at GPS. The first time I drove from here to Brian's house, and I punched in his address on the phone. Don't have it on my car yet, but have it on my phone. And, it knows where I was. In 100 yards, turn left onto this road. How do you know where it's just an amazing thing. Especially when you're old enough to remember road maps. My dad had a collection of them of every state we traveled in. You just pull them out. And have you ever been successful at refolding them? To get them back to that nice little packet they were when you bought them at the gas station? Well, I remember when we first moved to this part of the country, Donna wanted to go somewhere that we had never been before. And it was before smartphones and MapQuest and all that kind of stuff. And you had to get out the road map or the atlas. And as I looked, it appeared that there were 3 different ways that we could take to get there. One of them, and those of you who remember road maps, was kind of bold and wide and like dark blue, and it had interstate on it, which is always my preferred mode of travel. And then there was another way that we could go that went a little slightly different way. It was a pretty good sized line, and it was a fairly straight line to get us there. And then there was a third way to get there. Little bitty, thin, could barely see it, and every 32nd of an inch there was a curve on it. One of these winding, and I said, I know what that little line means. That means it's one of these county maintained roads that is going to have curves all over the place, and you have which is Donna's preferred way of getting where we want to go. But so you had your choice, and so by sitting down and carefully weighing the path, how are we best going to get there? Or I could have just said, it feels to me like if we just get on Fury's Ferry Road and keep on going, we'd get there. Well, maybe not, depending on where you're going. But the tragedy is, so many people live their lives without ever getting out the map and looking where the road's going to end. And they just say, it feels like I want to do this for a while. It feels like I want to do this for a while. No. Think it out ahead of time, before you start. What if you just start down this road and you find out that the bridge is out? Or, the road all of a sudden has stopped, or that road's no longer there. Sometimes road maps get obsolete and suddenly that road's no longer there. Be careful before you start the trip. And that's the first thing Solomon says. Watch your feet, and before you make that decision on which road you're going to travel, think it through. Now, it seems like, how do you think ahead and know where this road is going to lead before you start on it? Well, the Scripture gives us guidelines. God will give us insight. You can think through, where will this end if I start this direction? Give careful thought to your feet. The second thing he says is be steadfast. The King James says be established in all of your ways. Now the word ways there means the course of your life, how you live your life. The word translated established or steadfast means prepare it and be ready. And that caused me to stop. Because I was prepared to say, and here what Solomon is telling us is, have stability in your life. But he's telling us a whole lot more than that. The word literally means prepare your life, be ready for your life. Now, how can you do that? How can you be prepared for whatever comes your way? You know, we have family in Florida that was in the path of this hurricane. And they know how to prepare. You know, a couple of days before it was going to hit, they were getting their water, they were getting the food, they were getting the hurricane shutters up. You know, they were prepared because they'd been through it before. But we all know that life throws things at us sometimes that we could have never thought were coming our way. How do you prepare for the unexpected? How do you prepare your life? And I was thinking about that. How do you set it up? How do you get ready? How can your ways be established? And God brought to my mind Matthew chapter 7. If you want to turn there, it's, you know the story. It's the story of the wise man and the foolish man. And I think this is what God is saying to us. This is how you prepare for life. This is how you can be established in all of your ways. Matthew 7, verse 24. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Two men, exact same words are used about them. They have heard his words. I put it like this. They went to the same small group. They went to the same church every week. They sang the same songs. They heard the same sermons. They did the same Bible study. One of them's house was not established. And when the storms came, it collapsed. The other one's house was established. And when the storms came, it stood. There's only one thing different between those two men. He who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice. He who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice. The difference is obedience. And it seemed like God was saying to me that the way you establish your life, the way you prepare for the unpreparable, is to obey what God has shown you. Because when you obey, that's your preparation. A life of obedience to Christ allows you to be steadfast and established in all of your ways. The third thing he says is turn away from everything that would be a hindrance. Do not turn to the right or the left. This is a way that frequently you'll read it in the Old Testament that just basically means keep on the straight path. Don't deviate from what God has told you to do. You read that often. It'll say, and God said do this, do not turn to the right or the left. In other words, just keep straight on what God has shown you to do. Turn away from everything that would be a hindrance to you. One of the things to prepare to be established is making sure that you remove all of the hindrances, all of the obstacles. When I was doing public announcements for a local high school football team, I would go there early to get ready for the game and go over the rosters and all that. And teams that were consistently, top-ranked teams had an interesting ritual. Well before they changed even to start warming up, they would get off the bus and they would come down to the field. And they would line up across the field, the entire width of the field if they had that many players. And they would walk that field from end line to end line. And I asked Brian about it after. I said, what are they doing? He says, well, they're kind of doing two things. says one of the things they're doing is kind of psychologically saying, this is our team. This is our field. We're going to make this our home field whether we're here or not. But he said the other thing they're doing is they're scoping out the field. They're looking for soft spots. They're looking for, holes that didn't get filled back in. Because a home team knows, stay away from that side of the field, because it's harder or whatever. He said they're scoping out the field. They're looking ahead to see, here's how this field slopes, because every football field basically has a crown and it slopes for drainage and stuff. They're checking out how steep the slope is. They're checking out any places where there are gouges or uneven surfaces. They're checking it out. They're doing what Solomon said to do. Remove everything that would be a hindrance. I do the same thing when I golf. At the red course at putt-putt. But you'll watch, if you watch golf, you'll see before a putt, and I don't know what they're allowed to do legally, but you'll watch him, and the golfer will go and he'll move that piece of pine straw or move that pebble. I've seen them shoo away bugs, just to try to remove all of the hindrances so that putt goes where they want it to go. That's what Solomon is saying. He is saying, turn away from everything that would be a hindrance as you live your life, so that chapter 4, verse 12 can be true of you. When you walk, your steps will not be hampered, and when you run, you will not stumble. So Solomon says, give careful thought and weigh out the path you're taking. Obey what God tells you so that you can be established in all of your ways. Put aside everything that would be a hindrance to you. And fourth, stay away from evil. Keep your feet from evil. Now, I want to go back up with you to verse 16 of Proverbs 4 that talks about evil people. It says they cannot rest until they do evil. They are robbed of sleep till they make someone stumble. Have you ever known somebody like that? Who seem like they're not going to go to bed at night until they can mess up somebody's life. Well, those words, evil and stumble, are the same words that are used here in verses 26 and 27. And what really got me, thinking, so wait a minute, there's more here than meets the eye, is when I studied the meaning of the word evil. It does mean wrong, but it also means worthless, good for nothing, and to tear down or break down. And when that hit me, I just kind of stopped. And right about then, as I was working on this message, one evening after I got home from work, worthless, good for nothing, that breaks you down or tears you down. Donna said, supper's ready. And I said, you're going to need to start without me because I'm in the middle of an insight here and I can't let it go. When I get those thoughts, I got to stay with it, until I work it through. That's an incredible thought. Good for nothing, worthless, that tears you down or breaks you apart. It's used of breaking down boulders to make stones for a path. And I said, now how do we stay away from evil? And that led me to James chapter 4. And you probably know James chapter 4, verses 7 and 8. Submit yourselves to God. That means obey. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God. He'll draw near to you. That's how you stay away from evil. You stay away from evil by staying as close to God as you can get. Submit to God. Obey him. Resist the devil. Now remember, it's resist the devil, not resist temptation. The Bible never tells you to resist temptations. It says don't yield to it, but it doesn't say resist it. Because when you resist temptation, you're putting all your focus on that temptation. And Satan tempts you in areas that are appealing, but off limits to you. And so if you keep your attention focused on that, you're going to tend to give into it. the story I always use when I teach about this is if you're on a diet and somebody has a chocolate cake in the house, you can say all you want to, I'm not going to eat that cake. Boy, it smells good. Boy, it looks good. I'll bet that icing's great, but I'm resisting that temptation. I'm not going to eat it. I'm not going to eat it. And you end up with icing all over your face. Because you tried to resist the temptation instead of resisting the devil. And so James says to stay away from evil, submit to God, obey him, resist the devil, draw near to God. And so I'm working on this in my mind, and I cannot get away from the definition of this word evil of something that breaks you down or tears you down. And I think that there are things and people that we allow into our lives that in and of themselves are not sin, but they tear us down and they break us down. You stop and think about that. Do you have people in your life that tear you down? Do you have circumstances in your life that tear you down? That when you leave them, you're weaker. That your resolve is less. That your spirit is defeated. And your thoughts are negative. And God seems more distant. That's what he's talking about. Stay away from evil. Now, if you're married to him, you got you. But you know that we have to be careful, because sometimes we put ourselves in situations that tear us down, that break us apart. Solomon is saying, stay away from that. Yes, stay away from sin. Yes, stay away from nonsense and foolishness. But also, if you can, best you can, stay away from people and situations that tear you down, that hurt your spirit, that mess up your emotion, that disturb your peace. Try to stay away from those situations. Now, I know everybody's go home and quit your job. Don't do that. But he says, stay away from evil. In your notes, you will notice Hebrews chapter 12, verse 13. If you will turn there with me, please. Way back to the back of the Bible. Hebrews chapter 12. You may remember the first week we were in Proverbs. I said sometimes these verses are quoted in the New Testament. And if you find one of those, you should look at it, because sometimes the Greek words in the New Testament will give you more of a meaning and a broader, deeper meaning than the Hebrew words in the Old Testament. In some cases, it will actually add some commentary to it. And this verse, Proverbs 4, give careful thought to the paths for your feet, is quoted by the writer of the book of Hebrews in chapter 12, verse 13. Make level paths for your feet. That's the quote from Proverbs 4. So that, and this is something new added, the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. Okay, what does this mean? Make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. Well, the Amplified puts it this way: cut through and make smooth, straight paths for your feet that are safe and go in the right direction, so that the leg that is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. And you know how Gene Peterson puts it in the Message: clear the path for long distance runners so no one will trip and fall, so no one will step in a hole and sprain an ankle. Help each other out and run for it. Make level paths for your feet so that the lame will not be disabled. That's a word that was used in the first century in medical writings for a dislocation of a joint, but rather would be healed. So I'm digging into this because Solomon says, take careful thought. The Hebrew writer says, take careful thought so that the lame won't get worse, but it'll rather get better. And so as I'm digging into this, I find that some commentators think that the writer of Hebrews is talking about you and the lameness in your life. Live in such a way so that, you won't mess up more, so that you can find healing as you follow Christ. But more of the commentators think that he's talking about your influence. Live your life in such a way so that the people who are coming behind you, who are lame, that is, who are not spiritually whole yet, will not be dislocated or disabled or crippled, but rather will be healed. He's talking here about influence, which wraps up this whole spiritual wellness exam that we've been in for the last 7 weeks. See, we are not to live close to God just for us, but we're to live close to God for others, so that those who are following behind us can see the way to God. And so I'm digging into this. And I find that this word in the Greek language, level paths for your feet, literally can be translated wheel tracks. Wheel tracks? What in the world does that have to do with how you live your life? What he's saying is, be careful where you walk because you're developing grooves. And the people who are walking behind you are going to get in those grooves, so make sure that your grooves are leading the right way. And I started thinking about, what is this? And I flashed back to 2 things from my childhood. One was when we would go visit, family members who lived in the mountains, and they lived up in the mountains they called hollows or hollers, the little valleys. And there's one road to get up there, and it's dirt, and typically it's wide enough for one car. And every once in a while, there's a little area where if a car is coming at you, one of you has to back up until you get to the little place where you can pull over and the other guy can get through. When a rain comes, those roads get awfully muddy. And as vehicles drive up and down them, they create grooves or ruts in that road. And then when the sun comes out, it bakes that dirt. And those grooves are there, almost like you pour concrete. And somebody used to say you got to be careful when you go on that road to make sure you get in the right rut, because you're not getting out of that rut till it ends. And you need to make sure it's leading you in the right direction. And the second thing I thought of was when we would be driving on a highway in a snowstorm. One of those snowstorms where the snow is blowing horizontally and it's almost a whiteout. You can barely see the hood of the car. And if you were driving on a highway, what you tried to do was find a semi whose width was about the width of your vehicle, so that you could get in behind that semi and put your tires in its tracks and let it do the hard lifting, and you just stay in that groove and let the semi break the wind, and you just keep on going down your highway. The Hebrew writer says, make your living so consistently, so steadily in the same direction that you are creating a groove. That every day you're doing the right thing. Every moment you're making the right decision. There is such a consistency about you that as people are following you, and by the way, they are, whether you think they are or not, as people are looking at you and watching your influence and watching your life, if they decide to follow in your steps, make sure that the groove of your life is leading them to God. Make sure that your path is so consistent that you lead them to God. You know, the story they tell on Father's Day to make all the fathers feel guilty is about the father going out to the mailbox in the snow. And all of a sudden behind him, he hears his little boy saying, "Daddy, I'm walking in your footsteps," as he tries to step where his dad stepped. And we always beat up dads. Your little kids are watching your footsteps. Well, people are watching your footsteps. The people on the job, the people in your family, the people that you do business with. People watch your life. And the Hebrew writer says, make sure that you live so consistently. Make level wheel tracks. Make straight ruts, grooves in your life, so that you are so consistent that your influence draws people to Jesus. Paul said, be imitators of me as I imitate Christ. Wow. But that's our challenge. To live in such a way so that we are so consistent in our lives, that we are weighing carefully the paths for our feet, that we've removed the hindrances, that we're walking in obedience, that we're keeping away from evil so consistently that the people who are following us find their way to Christ. I preached myself under conviction. Proverbs chapter 4, verses 18 and 19 says there are two paths with two conclusions. The path of the righteous is like the morning sun, shining ever brighter till the full light of day. But the way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They don't even know what makes them stumble. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet. Be steadfast in all your ways. Don't turn to the right or the left. Keep your foot from evil. Your talk talks and your walk talks, but your walk talks louder than your talk talks. How's your walk? Father, it's easy to mouth the words of the Christian faith. It's another thing to live the truth of the Christian faith. And the world is looking for people who don't talk the talk, but who walk the walk. Lord, may we live our lives so consistently that people see Christ in us, in every decision we make, in every reaction we have, in everything that goes on in our lives. May we be so consistently facing you that our lives will lead people to you. What a challenge that is for us. But may we do it. May we be the salt of the earth. May we be the light of the world. May we be the people who cause others to want to know you more. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine on you and give you his peace now and evermore. Amen. God bless you. Thanks for coming out today. You are dismissed.